Good evening, Raleigh-Durham. This is Aaman from Aaman Patel Sports News on Radio Nyra, Raleigh-Durham on 99.9 FM HD4, 101.9 FM, and 1490 AM, the Triangle's only Desi news, talk, and music station. And I'm here with a very special guest, Mr. Babu Venkatachalapathy. He is a candidate for the individual director of the board of directors on USA Cricket. Babu, how are you doing today?
I'm very good, Aaman, and thanks for having me today. It's a wonderful evening, Raleigh. Listeners, rather viewers, right? So yeah, listeners. Aaman, before we kick off in this interview, thanks for hosting me today. But I want you to talk a little bit about your passion for cricket and how you got here, right? I think it's very important because one of the things this listeners will have from across the country, and I want a lot of the youth in country to hear about your history and journey into the cricket. Maybe we can start off with that. That would be wonderful.
Sure. I've been in the USA all my life. My dad played cricket here locally in North Carolina, and I just kind of followed him to games and played in the youth program and came up. And, over COVID, there was opportunities to do some of this commentary stuff. And I always liked it. I always thought about doing it and had a chance to do it at a small tournament and then kind of just kept growing with it, did the exhibition for minor league cricket. And now one of the commentators for the Morsel Raptors this season, and it's been absolutely phenomenal. I did the T20 series between the USA and Ireland, and also the Cricket World Cup League 2 series between USA and you had Oman, Nepal, Scotland, and the UAE all come down to play all these matches. So it's been a rather crazy journey over the past 2 years, and I'm thankful for everybody along the way, and could not have done it without all the support from all my friends, family, and loved ones, and everyone who supported me.
No, thank you so much for sharing that to the listeners today. I really appreciate, how you grew up in the US cricket system over the years, and as a kid, getting this far at the age of 18 is a phenomenal achievement. And I wish you all the very best. And, that shows we have a robust youth system, and not just in playing cricket in outside of, cricket field, but there are a lot of other roles that the kids can take up, right? Thanks for doing that, being a role model to the kids in the USA.
I appreciate that, kind words from you. But let's jump straight into this one. And, speaking of all the success that USA Cricket's having, it had one of maybe its most historic domestic seasons in 2021 with a lot of successes with 4 national championships, including the men's under 19, the women's under 19 national championships. The minor league cricket championship took place, and the breakthrough of the women's national pathway. How do you plan on building upon this success we saw in 2021?
So, it's a very interesting question, right? One part, we see the success, right? And if you look at success, there is a lot of things. Press meet alone is not success, right? There's a lot of effort went in. While we conducted all this, there is a lot of things that we could have done slightly better, right? And that's what I want to focus on, right? Because as you know, I'm involved in the US cricket for 15 years now, right? And I've been involved in it in various capacities from 2005. So we have had in the past national tournaments, under 19, etc., right? But a couple of things that we always, it's a great achievement, trust me. The minor league, I was very happy the way that we progressed, right? USA cricket has made a lot of strides in the last 5 years. But we also, in fact, I had a private chat with a few of the stakeholders in the Morrisville in the minor league finals. I was there, probably I'm not sure whether we met last year, right? And a couple of things that I think we could have done differently is bring a little more transparency and governance into the organization, right? And we could have probably brought in inclusive of more stakeholders, and also we could have had a robust domestic structure, right? When I say robust domestic structure, one of the things we lack is we don't have a domestic calendar right now. See, you know what? I'm thinking today, tomorrow, 2 weeks, we are pulling up a national tournament, right? You look at the women regionals happened just 2 weeks ago. The notice was given to people about a week ago, right? That's not how you run a national structure, right? When we talk about a domestic structure, you need a structure in place. It's not like, oh, you know what, we want to do it tomorrow, we are going to do that, right? And one of the challenges you see in homegrown, there are kids like you successful, there are kids like my kids, there are other kids who a lot of people can afford, right? And some of the things that's happening is basically challenging is right now is like when you don't give them enough time for the trials, right? And one of the way that we do the domestic selection trials are we give them a week's time and say, hey, you come, right? And go, it's 1 week, you do the trials. Now, the challenge happens is not everybody can do within the short window, right? So while we do these tournaments, are we doing it in a better way, organized way? right? And are we putting up a proper domestic structure? And for example, you take Triangle Cricket League as an example, right? Because you're from Raleigh, so I'm relating to it. There are other leagues, right? I can name ACCA, I can name BACA, I can name, Northern California Cricket Association, right, across the country. Now, when you look at those kids, when they play, right, now there are kids playing, adults playing, right? And when you say they play within the league, right? And then we tell those kids to just come, play over a regionals in 3 days, and we are going to select a regional team, right? I think that could be looked at differently, right? While we need to have the trials, we need to have interleague competitions, right? Okay. The Triangle should play across the other leagues because you are as good as your competition, right? So, if I play, let's say, a division, there are leagues that has multiple divisions, right? And let's say you play a Division 3, you score a century, it's not the same, the century that you score against a Division 1. So all you need to do is to put a structure around it when you do this and bring what you call, probably for a lack of a better term, I will say method to the madness, right? I mean, that's probably, I'm not calling it a madness, just to be clear, but I'm saying it's more a method to the madness, right? It's because you want to put a structure and you say, hey, we have a calendar. We know the season each league plays, right? So we can come up with a structure and say every year, let's say Memorial Day weekend, there will be a regional tournament, right? And when you come to the Independence weekend, there is going to be intra-regionals. Regionals can be interleague, then there could be intra-regionals, right? And you can go to the conferences right into the September, right? Something, I'm not saying these are the dates, but something like that, we can bring some structure is what I'm saying, if it makes sense to you.
Right. And so when you mentioned these trials, you mentioned playing at equal platforms, right? Division 300 is now the same as Division 100. Do you think the trials are lacking that right now, or is it your problem with the trials maybe just the week's notice time? You're just giving them such a short notice to go and compete in these trials? I
don't have any problem with the trials. I just want to be clear. Absolutely have no problems with it. All I'm trying to say is we can improve upon what we are doing differently, right? Sure. So how do you even select the people to the trials? If you don't have interleague tournaments, if you don't have inter-regional tournaments, you don't know what your top 30, top 40 in the regionals are, right? And if you come and say suddenly in 1 week, hey, I'm going to call, you're not giving an opportunity for the rest of the people to perform, showcase their talent, right? And then you develop a good bench through those systems, not only about the trials. One thing we need to keep in mind when we operate at national level is not about what we do today, right? Strategically, what we are going to do the next 3 years, what we are going to do in the next 5 years, right? How are you going to develop a bench? Today, if you look at the Indian cricket team is so successful, right? Can you tell me why?
They have a lot of players coming up through the system.
How do we foster that? To foster that through a robust domestic structure, if it makes sense. And that's what we need to focus on. While we focus at the top level to do the trials and trying to do the nationals done, etc., if we start developing those domestic system, that will lead right up there.
Well, that leads me to my next question. It was, what do you see as the single most important need in American cricket community? And I think you kind of touched on it, is that kind of robust domestic system. Is that the most important need, or is there other needs you feel that are ahead of that as well?
For me, I said that the top three, I think that will fix half of everything else, is governance, accountability, and transparency. Because once you put any structure, right, it's like a corporate America or any other nonprofits on governance and come to leadership, right? I think leaders need to lead by example, right? And that's where when you put your governance, your accountability of leaders, and the transparency of the system in place as a national governing body for USA cricket, I think the remaining pieces will fall into its own places, right? And then you can have, for example, I may say this is the best domestic structure, right? And from what I have seen so far, but that you may have a different view, right? And you may have somebody else may come with a different view. And we need to collectively make the best decision for USA cricket, right? And when you try to make a collective decision, what is more important to fix the foundation of the house? And the foundation of the house relies on governance, accountability, and transparency. Once you fix that foundation, I think the rest of the pieces will fall in its place.
What do you think is the best way to fix those three pieces, right? How do you think you gain more transparency through the governance of USA cricket, the accountability? How do you think you fix those pieces and make that foundation very strong for USA cricket?
Well, that's a great question, right? I think that's where, if you look at my campaign, I'm not sure whether you looked at it.
Yes.
The first and foremost, I think two commitments I made myself, right? I put it out in open public, right? And one of the commitment is I will not be involved in any for-profit activity while I'm in office. When I say for-profit, it's everything. Owning a minor league team. It could be owning a cricket merchandising. It could be running a cricket clinic. As a board of directors, I'm not supposed to be doing, or not even affiliated with the league. In fact, one of the commitments I put it out to the NGC, and I made the email public, is basically I said I will resign my post of the league president if I need, the minute I get elected, because then I won't be neutral to the rest of the leagues. I'm not going to get involved, right? So it's a perception is important, transparency is important, right? If everybody running for an election in the board or be part of the board, I request be open with your conflict of interest document. It's nothing to hide. And I asked NGC and USA Cricket to be public with it, but unfortunately they choose not to, and I respect the decision. It's there could be various complications involved, but it's my document. I'm open to publicly said that, and that's why I said. The second most important issue, right? Probably that is another issue. I both has equal weightage is conducting elections in time. Okay, I mean we are lacking big time in corporate governance, right? 8 of the 10 board of directors currently running on expired terms. How do we call it a governance? And for God's sake, we are the national governing body for USA Cricket. We need to lead by example. Leaders need to lead by example, right? I mean, there could be various reasons, but the board was structured with a staggered board with things in mind, in the sense like if one board of directors is not there, 2 board of directors is not there, there are 8 other board of directors to manage the show. And I requested the entire board of USA Cricket a year ago, said, hey, 2 of the board's terms has been eliminated, right? They expired. Please don't let them be part of the board meetings at a minimum. That's how you protect the organization integrity. It's not about individuals. It's not about the board. It's all about how do we protect the bigger piece, which is the organization, right? And that's why, if you look at, I also put it as part of my flyer. I will not be in the office even for a single day after my term expires. When I vacate the seat, the board will be forced to conduct an election, right? And we all as leaders need to lead by example, right? And that's why I talk about governance, right? Because when you don't even conduct an election, what moral grounds we have the leagues to say you have to do this, you have to do it right. And the other big problem, somebody can go to court and you can hear about a lot of lawsuits, this, that, right? Because I come from a corporate America also. So not only I have a cricketing background, I manage a corporate business too, right? And there are a lot of pitfalls to that, right? A lot of people are upset about these things, but not everybody is going to take the legal route because we all care about the game. And we do not want to bring the game and the progress that you mentioned, we don't want to bring them into disruption. But that should not be construed as a weakness. And hey, you know what? We will conduct whenever we want. That should not be the mindset, unfortunately, right? I'm not saying that's a mindset. There could be various challenges. But again, as leaders, our job is to remove those obstacles and make things happen. Instead of saying, oh, because of this, I couldn't do it. Because of that, I couldn't do it. Then this will be my answer. If I cannot do that, probably the situation may come. In my term, that I could not be able to do an election in time. Things can happen. Things can definitely. Then you make way for others who are capable to do the job. That's the way I look at it, right? I mean, that's why I said, if my term ends, I'm not going to be there. I told it on my flyer, put it on Facebook. I'm telling it on open air. I will not be in office for a single more day beyond my term. I hope that happens.
This is currently the 2020 election, so it has been delayed. I want to go back to your first point, though, when you talked about those perceived conflicts of interest. Considering that everyone is involved in cricket across the country and they're associated with some kind of special interest of some sort, we don't have the huge base of minds to go from. Is your perspective of how everyone's associated with some kind of league, are you saying that no national selectors or no national governing body members should be a part of any of these local communities or be part of these local boards?
No, you're wrong, right? I'm not saying they shouldn't be part of local community, but they cannot be involved in any for-profit.
Okay.
Right? That's a huge difference.
Right.
Because you need all the expertise to be involved in local community, right? You are a national selector. I want you to be involved in local youth cricket. I want you to help as much as you can. I want you to see what's happening, because if you are a national selector today, all the national selectors we have today are the best in cricket, best in their fields, right? I mean, we have some of the best who played for Test cricket, played for different countries and national selectors and have proven again and again their mental. They should be involved. But when the same person, especially in board, right? I'm talking more from the board perspective. when you have your own business running based on cricket, that's when the conflict of interest arises, right? So when you talk about anybody in a governing role, right? And if you need to there is perception. Again, that's why I use the word perception of conflict of interest, right?
Right.
The minute the perception kicks in, it damages the brand in corporate value, right? And that's where it's very, very important that we need to keep the perception in check. How we keep the perception away is you get not involved and lead by example, right? Then, some of the decisions could be even the best intentions, but because of those perceived conflicts, you create a wrong perception in people's mind and you want to eliminate, right? Because you want to protect the brand and image of USA Cricket. That's the most important piece. It's not about Babu. It's not about another individual. It's not about anybody. The organization and the game is bigger than any one individual. We all has to realize and work towards it.
That is very true. You want to protect the brand and want to continue the spread. I saw on your flyer that you plan to develop funds to help the grassroots levels for youth and women's cricket. Considering that West Indies, a historically significant full body member, they have struggled to find even a shirt sponsor. How can you help USA Cricket hope to secure a significant sponsorships for these kinds of programs that you want to run?
Can you repeat the question 1 second, Aaman? You mentioned something about somebody couldn't find a shirt sponsor. I missed that piece.
Yes, the West Indies, a historically significant full body member, they do not have a shirt sponsor. They didn't have one on their last series. They played without the sponsor on their chest. So, seeing that it is a hard sell, how do you plan to help USA Cricket hope to secure those significant sponsorships to help those programs?
Yeah, I'm not privy to discuss about some of the conversation I had with the then CEO Ian Higgins and our sponsorship development committee as well, right? A couple of people involved. But I can tell you, so I want to give you take a step back on it, right? And want to see what a sponsor want to see, any sponsor, right? And any sponsor want to see is the brand value, right? And what is my ROI, right? Yeah. And I come from, as I mentioned, one of the things that you may want to a little bit understand my professional background, I want to go back. I come from more sales leadership. I manage a $50 million business for an IT company as a vice president, right? A publicly traded company. That's why compliance comes from, right? I mean, it's very critical for me. Compliance is a bigger piece on what I do on a day-to-day for me, right? And, the key piece there is how do you develop a brand and how do you sell it to, right? I run a sales organization, right? I manage a sales leadership. Now, without going to specifics, even USA Cricket was looking for national sponsors, right? And for the national tournament. And I brought in a high net worth individual, where the whole entire US budget could have been managed with that. But, it's fine. I mean, the talks, unfortunately, we couldn't sell that organization the value that they can bring to the table, right? And some of those areas you need to focus on. How do you develop a brand? How do you remove the perception, right? Because, for example, if I'm going to approach a sponsor today and say, hey, Mr. X, you run an apparel store. I want you to be a commercial partner for me. Oh, good. You board itself have a commercial enterprise. You guys are even doing merchandising. You yourself are a competition to me. How am I going to support you, right? And how are you going to support US? There's another thing to look at. I mean, minor league made some strides. I mean, and I mentioned, in my talk with the Steve Robb, if you don't noticed, actually, one of the things when I was in Morrisville, I really liked how the community rallied behind, the minor league there, right? And that's your sponsorship opportunity, right? How do you engage the community, right? You need to bring the communities together. You need to increase the viewership of cricket. And that can be done by a better governance and accountability and transparency and inclusiveness, right? And you need to think of ways of how can we drive the local people to come and watch the game? How can we, those are the things that's going to drive the value for the product. Yeah. And rope in the sponsorship if it makes sense to you, right? And at the end of the day, it's a business. It's an ROI. How well you show an ROI to a sponsor, it's going to bring you that sponsorship for you.
Right. And you spoke about bringing in more people to come watch the games and those local infrastructures, improving those local infrastructures that are going to help bring people involved. You mentioned MLC. They've raised over $70 million. They've developed grounds and infrastructures, including Church Street Park, set to see some big changes, and they brought in turf and hybrid wickets. How do you plan to work with them to keep because I saw on your flyer that you plan to develop these local infrastructures. How do you plan to work with them to keep these local infrastructures growing?
No, it's a great question. See, MLC have done a lot of work in the last 2 years, right? And as a commercial partner to USA Cricket, they have done a lot. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to make sure the USA Cricket's goals and the commercial partner goals are clearly defined, and we all understand what role each is to play. Right. I think that's where some clarity is required at this point, because USA Cricket has to focus on the domestic cricket governance, responsible for the US national team, etc. And minor league is focused on the major league and minor league MILC and develop the infrastructure. And we both have to work hand in hand. And the good relationship is definitely important between both our organization for the game to be successful, right? I mean, and we need to promote, right? And when we talk about local infrastructure, so one is there are high-class grounds, right? Because we are looking at the World Cup, we want those grounds to come in, right? And we need to focus for Major League, we know those stadiums. And those are a long-term play, right? Then how do we develop the grassroots, right? I want to have grounds like Morrisville. I mean, in fact, a lot of private people has done, right, to be honest, over the period in USA Cricket, right? When MLC have done at national level, for example, you take Musa Stadium, right? It was a completely private funded stadium, right? Perivy Cricket Complex, 8 fields. It's all done by an individual, right? And you see 2 fields right now, all has 8 cricket fields, right? It's all done by individuals in Atlanta, right? While MLC have a lot of plans on bigger stadiums, I think we are still waiting for some of those stadiums to come alive, right? Like, for example, the Airhawks stadium conversion, that's a great project. We talked about LA, there could be a stadium. We talked about there is something in Seattle coming up. But right now, USA Cricket actually thrives more on this private created grounds, right? And we use that as an infrastructure in USA Cricket right now. In fact, I missed to mention the first ever ODI stadium in Florida where the city invested, right? In fact, the Florida and Morrisville, and in fact, what we have done, it's a very small scale in my town, Little Elm in Texas last year, are a classic examples of the private-public partnerships. And that's where we need to focus on, right? Like in Morrisville, there is a bit of investment from the private and there is a majority investment came from the city, right? I think city have invested because they saw, cricket sports is a lot of cities views sports as the sports brings all the community together. It's about togetherness, right? And then it develops the local business structure, right? And I think the more we work with the public-private partnership across the country, we can replicate the model of Morrisville have done. In fact, I don't know whether you remember, Aaman, we just recently opened a ground in my town, Little Elm, Texas, this year. And I'm so proud of that ground. I mean, the councilman from the city helped me a lot. It's an effort of me nagging him and him really working on it for 2 years. We were able to get the first ever cricket field in Texas in an elementary school. Okay? There is no other cricket field in Texas in a school field. And one of the challenges we have currently is, unfortunately, with too many leagues. I mean, you don't see that in Raleigh. At least you have it's a good abstract, And then some of the bigger towns, you have multiple leagues, right? And we try to a lot of stress around the local infrastructure to play the local games, youth games, right? So what you need is develop those local grounds and better outfields, and you have the need to someone to work with the cities, local administrators and school boards if required to kind of bring that community together. And I think that's where I want to focus on. From USA Cricket, that's where we need to focus on. While, the commercial partner of MILC focus on those things, on the bigger things, and they are doing their role. I think as USA Cricket, we need to take a look at what we need to do to the local community to bring the feeder system better for those MILC and MLC to be successful, if it makes sense.
Yeah, and the public-private partnership you spoke of here at Chershi Park, MLC, part of that private partnership, public-private partnership with the town. I also want to go to another part of your flyer. You said, you're trying to build this youth and women's cricket all throughout the country. Seeing how we are somehow closer to full member status than we are to NCAA status because of Title IX, which means there's not nearly enough women playing cricket to justify NCAA cricket teams because you need to have a similar number of men to women to have NCAA status. How important is it to you to grow the women's game, and do you have a plan to increase that popularity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, women cricket is very close to my heart. My daughter is 12 years old, right? And it's basically she doesn't play cricket, but obviously it is very close. She just started this year, right? But it's really close to my heart. How do I develop women cricket, right? In fact, I have a couple of good friends involved in women cricket, without naming them, right? Over the years, not today. I mean, I have somebody who I look up, have done some very high roles in women cricket across the globe, right? And we talk all the time. In the last 10 years, I've known her about women cricket, right? And so some of the things that we need to do, it again goes to grassroots, right? And how do we make a play? Okay, you know what? We can tomorrow say, hey, come on. Okay, my daughter 12 years old. Okay, that's right now. Okay, all the expat population, we get them to play, right? But what we need to do is to make sure the mainstream kids like you, right? I'm looking, Aaman, kids like Aaman come and play the cricket, home ground, cricket in 8 years and 10 years. And when I mean that, it's also local people, right? You have to have the local community pick up the game. We want the local kids to pick the bat, right? And that's a key to that, make it happen. And that change you cannot do overnight by, we got this 20 players. Now we have a team and all that. But that goes back again to the same thing I was talking about. You need a robust domestic structure, right? You need to have a structure and say, hey, there is going to be under 11 for girls. There is going to be under 12 for men, right? And under 10, under 12. From those levels, you need to start developing the kids, both men and boys and girls, to play the game. That will create the feeder system. In 5 years, you have so many people play across the country. And if you can play some playbook, if you have to take it, you can take it from soccer. Soccer was similar in this country a few years ago, and now we have seen where it taken us, right? And I know there is a great initiative going on for 2028 Olympics. I seriously hope that's, in fact, I don't know whether you saw the news you read in Washington Post about Dallas youth cricket, and if you're not, probably I'll share it today. And
share that with me for sure.
I'll probably put it in the Facebook too, and that's where I even said that in my town opening. I mentioned that in that interview as well. My dream is to see a Olympian from Dallas, because I'm from Dallas. Obviously, I'm going to feel it. But but the reality is that when 2028, if cricket is fortunate, I think definitely cricket need to be there, because there is a lot of market for cricket, and when that happens, I think that can pivot the game to a different level. But until then, what we also need to do, looking at 2028 in mind, we need to develop home ground feeder system. As USA Cricket, we need to focus very closely on that.
So that feeder system you talk about, do you think that is a national level thing where there's a national under 11 team, or is it more of, okay, these local communities, local leagues, okay, there's an under 11 team for the boys, under 11 team for the girls, and it works like that, and then they play interconference kinds of games?
Exactly, right? Like you mentioned, the way is national governing body has to facilitate, provide the tools to the local leagues, and come up with a structure and say, hey, as a national governing body, we want you to have under 11 team, under 15 team. We are going to have inter-regional. So a triangle will play with the Garden State of New Jersey, within the New York region, or with Atlanta, right? And the national governing body facilitate those inter-league. So as I mentioned, right, you need to have inter-league, you need to have inter-regionals, and then you need to have a conference, and you need to have a nationals, right? And that has to be a system that's set in play. It's not like, oh, you know what, we are not going to do that. We are not going to have a calendar. Okay, now we find some window to do this. We are going to do it in the next week. It's not that way. It has to be, if I'm playing a kid, 13-year-old, I should know, oh, next Memorial Day weekend, I shouldn't travel because I have a tournament coming up for me to play. You know what I mean? We need to have that fixed calendar for all these tournaments, and we need to put a domestic structure, and we need to bring some kind of a regional either a structure or regional alignment, because there are a lot of leaders in regional levels, right, at league levels, have contributed to the game over the years. They know the local landscape, they know the local challenges, right? And they can be our biggest support. We need to engage them more, and we need to harness that experience, right? I think that's a key piece, right? Because the cricket is played in this country for forever, right? In fact, we have the first international game happened in USA, right? Now, for various reasons, we didn't take off. Then USA Cricket Association, the former association, was the first associate member of, they created the associate membership model for ICC, right? And so there's a lot of history. And along with that history, we have a lot of homegrown talent, players, right? When we talked about the national selectors, I can talk about our national, selectors and national coach, people like Mr. Clayton Lambert, and we have people like, Mr. Asim Mustafa, who played for Test cricket and being a woman coach now. And I can talk about our former captain, played for USA 10 years, Steve Masaya, right? There are a lot of talent In fact, I missed Amir Aflafdin, right? Yeah, who is our, so there is a lot, I can keep naming, right? But there are a lot of talent the USA cricket has produced and who have carried the USA cricket in their shoulders at players, administrators, coaches level for the last 15 years, 20 years or more than that. We need to harness them. We need them to feel part of the community, bring them all together, and we need to take that experience and see how we can develop better.
Well, thank you so much, Babu. It's been great having you on. If there's one last thing you want to say to the people that you want to leave them with, now's the time. What would you say to them?
All right, you put me on the spot. One thing, transparency. I seriously believe in it. I think as a national governing body, USA Cricket has a moral responsibility to be transparent to its members. The minutes of the boards has to be released every month. And if I get elected, I will host a monthly town hall on a Zoom meeting. Anybody come, they can ask any questions within the parameters that I'm allowed to answer. I would be happy to answer. But I will make myself available every month to the common public so that they can ask me straightforward their questions they want.
Well, thank you so much, Babu. Thank you so much for coming on. Radio Nyra appreciates it. I appreciate it. And everybody, this is your candidate for the individual director of the board of directors on USA Cricket, Babu Venkatachalapathy. Thank you so much, sir, and have a great day.
Thank you, Aaman, for hosting me. And once again, I'm going to tell you, you have accomplished a great at 18. And listeners, I'm going to take your name across the country as an example. I mean it. Because you kind of inspire the kids to pick on cricket and not just playing. We need scorers, we need umpires, we need commentators, we need a whole infrastructure. And kids like you taking that and growing up, it really makes me so proud. And thank you for having me on.
I appreciate it, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.